are never truly lost. Well, okay, sure. Maybe we get turned around for a few days in the woods, where life just feels like it's getting the best of us and everything's going wrong. And I'm Mike Martin, and I've stood right where you're standing, lost, beaten down, like nothing's ever gonna change. And that's why I built this camp. And that's why I'm inviting you to join me and all the members of this wild community. Because you know what, friend? It does get better. So come along with me into the wild and let me show you this awesome, unique skill set that lays within inside of you. With help from the land, we're going to unlock the steward that's inside each and every one of us that will lead the way out of the darkness and into healing. Here at the Camp of Healing on Project Mindfully Outdoors. John, I definitely am intrigued by this idea of somebody who isn't exactly into the outdoors as far as the hunting, fishing, hiking, and all that stuff, but they had the ambition to get out there.
Yeah.
And, being able to find that time, I think, is something that when you learn how to structure it into your schedule, it gives you an opportunity to grow. So I'm kind of curious about your take as far as what intrigues you.
Yeah, so like for me personally, I went hiking several times and through different like various tracks here in Connecticut and a couple in New York. And for me, the thing that I genuinely enjoy is the fact that you could put your phone away. The fact that, it's a lot of these tracks too it's not like a straight path. So sometimes you gotta, do a little bit of climbing. You might have to take some,
Right.
go uphill or downhill and stuff like that. So, and just being able to enjoy and appreciate what has been put on this earth and what's around us, that usually we live so fast, especially here in the Northeast. I feel like it's usually, especially being so close to the city, it's usually go 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 go, and there's a lot of urbanization and things like that. So every once in a while it's a nice balance to the normal super high fast pace, super social media, internet driven society that we're in. You're just kind of able to break free from that and get peace of mind. It's also pretty decent exercise. Like it's not like you're walking, it's like a trek almost. It's like, as I said, it's not like a straight you're walking down a sidewalk or walking around the track. It's kind of like its own like little mini journey in its own way. And it's kind of just figuring out like, okay, you know, where do I go from now? Because the tracks usually all have trails. And also too, it's like, worst case scenario, if a bear pops out, how do you get out? How do you get out of here? So, all that's kind of what intrigued me about kind of like the outdoor life. I also wanted to go skydiving. I have a lot of ideas. It's just never growing up, I didn't have the opportunity to do so. But like as I'm starting to build out my life and get into this entrepreneurial world, as I become financially free and independent, I'll be able to afford the opportunity to create time in my schedule to start doing a lot more of these things and start really exploring life for what it is.
That's one thing that I've definitely found throughout the journey of podcasting and, reaching out into the community to help a lot of people, because this was all founded kind of as a way to address like that thing that gets swept under the rug within the outdoor community. But as I've done so, I've been amazed and also intrigued by people from outside of that community that reaches out and wants to explore these things. And I think one thing that you touched on is that idea of, what happens when I get in that situation? It, with the bear, for an example,
Yeah.
you look at it and you're like, man, that could really happen. And what do I do? And I feel like when you're on the outside looking in and you're kind of getting your feet wet, it's scary. And I know from my journey, the opposite is true.
Yeah.
Walking into life and the day-to-day struggles of the world with, this new vision of, hey, I'm dealing with this anxiety, I'm dealing with this depression. That stuff is scary.
Hmm.
So being able to lean into the world that I come from and the world that I know made it safe to explore finding and discovering a purpose and a direction.
Yeah. And you mentioned, kind of like finding yourself kind of, and like I think the outdoors is one of the best opportunities to do so because there's no distractions. As I said, you probably don't have service, so even if you wanted to use your phone, and it's like best of luck using it. So it's like that instantly takes out the biggest distractor right there. And it's like it's something where, Mother Nature is what it is, right? And it's like it could be the most beautiful thing ever, but it also can be the like the most violent, scary, dangerous thing ever, all in the same, in the same breath. And it's like getting out there, it definitely teaches you a different set of skill sets that normally you would never be able to really incorporate into your life. So once you do gain those skills, it's like you become a lot more versatile because you've experienced things that most people never get the opportunity or never take the time to do so.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned the cell phone thing, and there's a lot of safety within that. In the day to day world, we're obsessed with being on our phone and being able to reach out and touch whoever. When you get out into the wilderness and you're somebody that is just getting their feet wet, that can be a scary situation because you don't have that safety net. You've actually got to learn to think on your feet and incorporate the fact that, you've got the grit and you've got the intelligence to navigate a situation. And then you mentioned the idea of that skill set. I think when you get out and you start building those skills and those abilities, you almost take it for granted, because I know for me firsthand, when I hit that brick wall in life and I had to shift and pivot, it was that skill set that I never thought about that became such a toolbox to be able to say, I go out and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a storm blows in. I've got to think on my feet and I've got to be able to survive the situation. Well, when I navigate the world through the set of glasses that I look at it now, it's no different. I walk into somewhere and I have an anxiety attack. I've still got to get through and I've still got to achieve whatever the objective is.
It's kind of it preps you for that fight, flight, or freeze, you know,
Right,
um,
right.
that we kind of often get faced with. And a lot of the things, it's kind of like throwing yourself into, for lack of a better way to put it, into the wilderness, into the cage, right? And when you put yourself out there, it's kind of, you test yourself. And then when you face like normal adversity, I want to, for lack of a better way to put it, normal adversities in life, right? You're more adept to handle a lot of these things because you've gone through a series of problems and things like that that you had to navigate your way through, that usually a lot more life threatening than, maybe just being stuck in rush hour traffic or you being late to work or some of these things that, we get super antsy and anxious about and things like that. It's like, well, if you have to, you go out camping and you have to start a fire and you forgot something at home. Well, now it's like you gotta really, as you said, think on your toes, get on, think very quickly, very fast, and figure out ways to handle situation. And that's all like out of the box, unorthodox things. It's not like you go to school and you're taught how to camp, or you're taught how to start a fire, or you're taught how to survive at all in outdoors or wilderness at all. So it's like it definitely teaches you a way of problem solving that you could, then take back into your regular day-to-day stuff. And it's like you're a lot more adept to handle a lot of these things that are thrown your way.
No, you're absolutely correct. And, I think that transitions beautifully into what it is that you do.
Yeah.
Because if you're walking down that path, like you alluded to in the very beginning, and all of a sudden you hit a fork and there's no mile marker pointing you in a direction, you go down the wrong path and you kind of get into a situation where you've got to start to obviously figure things out and shift and adjust. But finding those little markers, those little internal markers that kind of gear you in a direction and help you to transition into whatever that next chapter ends up becoming in life.
Yeah. And it's something that, you mentioned that when you're faced at a crossroad and you don't know which path to go because there's no more, direction. It's like it's a very hard choice to go down because a lot of times we don't know which way we're going. We're kind of just going with whatever feels right at the moment. And I feel like a lot of the time that's done from like lack of clarity of what the end goal is. Because usually the more clarity you have on where the end goal is, the next step usually presents itself in some way, shape, or form. And the thing with life though is once you start taking steps down one path, when you look back, it's not the same path you walk down. Like think of the movie. It's like when you start walking into the maze, and as soon as you look back, the maze has already changed behind you, because a lot of in life you can't undo a lot of the things that once it's done, right? Let's say you're in an argument with your friend and you say some things you might have shouldn't have said. Even if you try to walk back on that path, it's not going to be the same steps because you can't just unsay those words, right? It's already been said. And so it's like when you're trekking on this journey of life, whether it's outdoors, speaking metaphorically, I mean, or speaking physically, like literally, or in your life in general, like just speaking more so metaphorically, no matter which path you go down, you got to be very, very careful and cautious but also have that confidence to continue down the path. But be careful as well, because when you look back on the path behind you, it's not going to be the same way. You can't just, back trace your steps to get to the last checkpoint. The path has already shifted and changed as you move forward because you can't, as I said, undo some of the things or you can't undo anything once it's already done.
Well, see, that kind of brings up like a quote that I've actually written on the dashboard of my truck is you never step in the same river twice. You can
Yeah.
try to walk that path, and sometimes life puts you in those situations that you almost feel like it's Groundhog Day. You're reliving.
Yeah.
However, something in that surrounding is different. There, just like when you step in a river, it's never identical. And it causes you to have to shift and pivot and find that new direction by looking around and seeing what the picture looks like and what it is that's different. You've got to stop and think about it a little bit. And I think that a lot of us get in those habits where we form like an unhealthy way of being or thing that we do when we kind of cross a path that we've experienced in one way or another. It gives you an opportunity to not only look at and evaluate what it is that you do and how you view the situation, but it also gives you that chance to pivot into something new.
Yeah, and the ability to pivot, something that you learn very quickly, that if you don't have that ability, that your whole life is pretty much gonna suck. Because and it's harsh to say, but it's in all reality, no matter, as I said, whether it's walking outdoors or speaking metaphorically, life usually doesn't pan out how we plan it, right? And you, especially when starting off, whether it's a new hiking trail, or whether it's a new entrepreneurial endeavor, or whether it's a new job, or maybe it's a new relationship, whatever it may be. A lot of the time, pretty much almost all the time, it never plans out the way that we plan it to. So being able to pivot, being able to roll with the punches, is something that you definitely have to work on, and it's a skill that we can all get better on and always use some improvement on, because the further we walk down this road, whatever road it may be, and the higher up we climb the ladder of success, or whatever we're aiming at, whatever we're orienting our life towards, there's going to be a new set of challenges and trials and tribulations that occur, arise. And if you're not used to pivoting, or you're not able to face them, you're pretty much lucked out because you'll get stumped. And then now it's like everything that you worked for up to that point had just come crumbling down because you were so fixated on that one path that you couldn't deviate it from at all. And like, just in my own like life, I'll share a story. Like for me, like I wanted to get into real estate, but I also had the podcast and I had the social media marketing agency type thing all going at the same time. And I still worked on the side as on a restaurant. And so it's like I had all these different things going at the same time, and nothing was growing. So like towards the end of like 2022, I had to pivot. I had to, sit down and analyze like, hey, nothing's growing. If anything, everything is crumbling down. what do I do now? Do I keep trying to grow everything up, or do I double down in one thing and focus on that? And so I decided to focus on my podcast. And if I would have, kept going with my ego, I would have kept trying to build up all four things at the same time, and I would have had pretty much everything come to the ground. But because I was able to pivot and say like, hey, I'm not letting these things go permanently, and just at where I'm at right now in my life, I have to move down this path instead of trying to take a step down every path. Just walk one path and focus on where that's going to take me.
But you bring up an interesting point, because I know I do it, where you set up all these different things, these different goals and whatnot, and you anticipate that they're gonna blossom. And when they don't, you look at it almost as a failure. And the more failures that add up, the more you kind of become unwilling to try.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important aspect to mention that, allowing yourself the grace to realize not everything is going to be perfect. Not everything you set out to do is going to happen the way you see it in your head. So giving yourself the room to not fall victim of that story that instantly gets built around the negative side of it really gives you that space to continue and allows you an opportunity to explore the situation.
I think a lot of it comes down from our school system. Now I thought around failure, because a lot of time we fail, and everyone gets turned off. They get nervous. They get scared. They get upset. Maybe ashamed, and they get all these negative feelings. And it's because we've shifted. We put a negative connotation around the word failure, when in actuality, failing, all that means is that you have opportunity for growth. And if you know anything about life, you realize very quickly, that the only time we really truly feel, I guess, depressed is when we feel like we're stuck or going backwards, right? So when we fail, right, there's opportunity for growth, meaning you have somewhere to move forward, you have space to move forward. Getting straight A's isn't great at all, but there's nothing to work on when you got straight A's. That's boring. Like, that's why you see all the trust fund babies depressed and facing all these mental health issues. It's because they already have everything. There's no more room really for growth in their lives, because no matter what, anything they do, it'd always be, oh, it's because your dad or your mom or this or whatever. So all their life accomplishments instantly get diminished. But whereas when you're failing, you have more opportunities for growth. So now, instead of saying, "Hey, I failed, I suck," it's, "Hey, I failed. Let's go. That's great. I have opportunity to grow. Where is this failure pointing me to that I have to focus on so that I can grow?" Whether that's, maybe I wasn't disciplined enough. Maybe, let's say you're hunting. Like, let's say you were hunting deer, right? That's something that people love to do over here in Connecticut, where I'm at, especially this during hunting season. I haven't personally done it, but like, I know I had tons of friends in high school who, like, they used to go out with their family and do that. But it's like, you know, what are you gonna be, as you said, good at it the first time around? No, you probably suck, right? And being able to realize that and being okay with that, because the first time you're always gonna suck, unless you're like some super god given talent, like But for the most part, you're gonna suck, and that's okay, because after that, usually the first time you do something is the worst time you do something. So it's just being able to overcome that, and just now it's like the second time. Like, even when I used to do like flips all the time back when I used to be in middle school, and I used to go to the park and play outside and all that stuff. I used to flip all the time, and flip off of slides and swings, and just flip everywhere. Anywhere you could think of, I was doing backflips and stuff and front flips. And it's like, the first flip, I would always just like kind of throw myself, and I would always land on my butt or something. But it's like, just getting that out of the way. I was like, now I can fully commit, and then let me just go back and stand up and wipe my dust off and my dirt off, and then, all right, let's do it again, and just keep going like that.
Well, yeah, I definitely think it's the idea of getting in and getting dirty where the growth really happens. And how you mentioned that when you sat back and you looked at the year and you had the things that you defined as shortcomings. So you looked and you found one thing that you were doing strong in, and you set your vision there. I think that when things are coming up short, if you take that time and you look and you evaluate with an honest point of view, you find that strength that one thing that is going right, that you can build the momentum.
Yeah.
And it's almost like building a tinder pile. In order to start a fire, you've got to start somewhere. So when you get all the dry tinder together, and then you start rubbing the sticks within that that strong spot, then you're able to start branching out. You're able to start getting back on your feet, getting that forward progress that when you lose it, it feels impossible to regain.
Yeah, and another thing too. So, and the topic of fires, right? We're talking about burning firewood and things like that, right? One of the most interesting, and this is a little bit of a pivot from the topic we're on now, but it ties back into the idea of wilderness very well. And one of the things I heard is, we're all kind of like forests, right? Majority of us have a lot of dead wood in our forest. There's a lot of dead trees taking up space. So it's like you have to start a forest fire to burn off all that wood. All that it's something that grows and happens all the time, and it's not a bad thing. Forest fires aren't bad. Of course, some may get out of control, but they need to happen so that the forest can keep on functioning as a proper forest, right? But better to have a wild forest fire that burns off all the dead wood and only leaves one strong oak tree standing than to have a giant forest filled with a bunch of junk, right? Because better have that one strong oak tree that is filled with, and that could be your mindset, your intentions, your morality, your code of ethics, your principles, whatever that is. Rather have that one thing that truly serves you, than have all this dead wood, and that could be your limiting beliefs, your anxiety, your fears, your worries, and what other people say. You're trying to impress others, all these different things that is just dead wood, all these thoughts and ideas that aren't serving you. And just being able to be okay to, man, if you have to burn the whole forest down, rather that than just have a bunch of dead wood taking space. And maybe when only a couple trees survive, well, use those trees and start from there to build a brand new forest.
Well, yeah, that ties beautifully into the idea of conservation. And there's an article that I've been working on lately about carrying capacity. And when you look at where you are now and where you want to go, you've got to look at all those different things that are not only internally but externally. And think about, if this was a parcel of land and I was managing it for deer, there could only be X amount of deer that can thrive before there's illness and starvation and everything else that ultimately kills off the herd. And that works internally for us as well. There's only so much that we can carry before we start hitting burnout, we start building a negative mindset, and ultimately start stumbling on our own feet and sabotaging where we're trying to go.
Yeah, and people talk about it all the time. You have to make room for the blessings and the things that come into your life, right? You have to make room for the opportunity. You have to make room for the lessons because uh, as humans, we're kind of wired in a way that we can continue learning forever, but sometimes there's only so much we can learn. There's only so much stimulus your brain can actually focus on at one given point in time. So it's like allowing that space for not only just nature to thrive, but also for ourselves to thrive as well. Because there's a lot of things that we hold on to, and sometimes we have to delete some storage, kind of like our iPhones, right? Delete some storage so that we can make space for the new apps and the new photos and the new memories, the new lessons and things like that.
Yeah, there's another article that I put together over the fall where I went on a hike, and it was probably the first couple of days of the fall, and looking at how the leaves change color and watching the wind blow, knock the leaves down. If you think about us being that tree, we hold on to this idea of self suffering. We like to make ourselves suffer no matter what the situation is because we think that that's going to help us to achieve whatever it is we're trying to set ourselves out for. But in the same way, that tree is holding on to those leaves, knowing that in the season to come, there's not going to be enough nourishment. So it would be detrimental.
Hmm.
But the leaves are, a beautiful, safe canopy, just like our self suffering is internally there. So with the wind blowing through, it forces that tree to let go. and it ultimately provides that room for the growth. And I think if we started to maybe relinquish a little bit of that negative narrative that and self-suffering that we always give into, it provides that space to objectively look at things that provide the growth and the opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that just from what I've been learning is like humans tend to have a natural inclination towards chaos, towards negativity. That's why news articles and things like that is news articles and media all have the negative headlines, which we have a natural. And even if we had like a perfect utopia, it wouldn't be long before someone screwed things up, just because why not? And just because like they wanted to change the scenery, right?
Right.
So it's like we always have, and knowing that our human, our intrinsic desires, whether we realize it or not, it's knowing that what's there. And you mentioned that suffering. There's a one guy that I listen to named Jordan Peterson. He talks about the idea that life is suffering, and despite that, we're adequately, prepared and equipped to transcend that suffering, as long as we orient ourselves to a higher good. Not meaning like in religion, it's like just orient yourself to doing something good for the world, for humanity, for the community, for nature, for whatever it may be. But it's like orienting ourselves to a higher aim helps us transcend this suffering and this natural inclination and proclivity to just ruin everything, as like kind of like human nature kind of makes us kind of do sometimes.
No, I love the way you put that because, recently I've obviously, with it being the start of a new year, I've done a lot of that reflecting too and trying to evaluate things. And, I've started this based off of just the notion that, hey, my life changed and actually ended up being saved because of a podcast. I wanted to put that out there as well and return. And, not thinking about the growth or the things the personal effects that were going to happen. But then to sit back, at the end of the year and look at things and be like, hey, I've really come this far just based off of the work that I do is really one of those things that it's not only kind of like shocking, like, because you don't really look at the big picture, but it's also really cool to think about, by pumping in to the greater good, it's giving back so much for me that I'm able to shed these different layers of skin that I used to carry. And I've always been one of those people that was caught up in that negative talk and that negative self narrative. So giving yourself credit for whatever forward based steps that you make is a difficult thing, not only for myself, but for a lot of people to do.
Yeah, and you mentioned that negative self-talk and things. When it comes to a lot of that, it stems from a scarcity mindset, and whether it's us not having a lot growing up financially, or whether it's our, maybe our parents fighting in the house, or whether it's getting bullied at school. Like we tend to adopt this scarcity mindset, and it's a mindset that most people have. And kind of to bring that into how we're talking about nature here and outside, if you look at anywhere where there isn't much human intervention, and you look at nature, there's an abundance of everything. All the animals have enough to eat, the trees, the leaves, the berries, the whatever. It's like when there's no human intervention, there's a abundance of everything. There's no one going without. Not because there's an infinite supply, but it's without that human intervention, that nature, it just is, right? And its natural state is abundant. And for us as humans, our natural state isn't kind of abundant. As I said, we're our brain is wired in ways to make us more, I get we're more attracted to the negative headlines. And each negative, for like each unit of negativity, it weighs close to about like 5 units of positivity. So like if someone says I hate you and you get one person says I love you, you'll probably remember the person that says I hate you a little bit more than the person that said I love you. Although, everyone wants love, but just hatred is, humans have like, we eat that up. And it's self-sabotage, and what you kind of mentioned earlier. And so kind of adopting that mindset of abundance, kind of like how it's like in nature without any human intervention, adopting that mindset of abundance, knowing that when we are living optimally and taking care of ourselves and we get ourselves in the right place and put the right stuff into our bodies, both physically and mentally, and that we can operate in a way similar to how nature is and not have to worry about lack of, whether it's bills or food or whatever it may be.
Well, that's a great point because if you think about the fact that, it gets back to that carrying capacity, and nature has this ultimate plan. But then when you think about us as humans, we are the only animal, we're the only species on this earth that tells ourselves the stories that we do. Everything else on earth lives within the moment, and it's just kind of part of what it is.
Yeah.
And I think, as I've navigated my journey, being able to tie yourself into that moment, whatever it is you're doing, because yeah, I get caught up in the negative self-talk and the things like that obviously we all absorb like sponges, and we pull out every opportunity that we can to make ourselves feel worse but yet feel better, as ironic as that is. And then you look at, like, a deer and the way that they navigate through the world. They know that they're on the menu for everything out there, but they don't let that stop them from living their life and doing their purpose. And I think as we walk further down our own personal trails, looking at nature and the environment, the way animals interact with not only each other but the world around them, can teach us so much.
Yeah, and like to go on that same topic of a deer, right? Knowing that everyone is out to get them, you have to ask yourself, and now what? Do you sit there and just die, roll over, not do anything, not live life, not experience, not be in a moment? Or do you continue to push despite maybe, yeah, all the odds are stacked against you, all the decks are stacked against you, and you got to ask yourself, now what? Are you gonna let that stop you? Because at the end of the day, you're still breathing, right? You're still living, right? We're not living in a sense where you're actually living, but you're living in a sense where you're still alive, right? Because being alive and living are two separate. That's a whole different topic, but like that's two totally separate different things. And I think one thing too, when it comes to deers, and when you're on the highway, you're whatever you drive, or whether it's like some type of I-95, which is what we got over here on the Merritt, there's a lot of deers, and so a lot of the times when you're driving fast, these deers freeze, and that's one way where you shouldn't be a deer, right? Because unlike deers, you mentioned we're the only humans that people that kind of tell ourselves this narrative, and we've been given this opportunity where no matter what our body is feeling, we have the mental power to be in control at all times. So knowing that it's we're always on the menu, it's it's something that's definitely scary, but you have to keep moving forward. And then when as a situation arrives, unlike deers, we can actually have an opportunity to fight, flight, or freeze. Whereas with deers, it's kind of like once they get snuck up on, they're caught off guard. Just freeze, and then it's over for them. For us, we have the opportunity and ability to, actually combat that freeze and make the decision of whether or not we want to move, or whether or not we want to fight back.
Well, I think honestly it comes down to just the idea of being able to trust in their response. Like,
Yeah,
hey, if I make the wrong choice, then I'm dinner. But
yeah,
I got to go with it one way or the other. And, they do have some amazing abilities and, senses that do help them detect danger. And when they come across it, they have natural reactions and reflexes that either they're going to charge it and, hope for the best, or they're going to bolt and be gone and get away.
yeah, it,
And, I think that a lot of the time we kind of lose sight of that too internally,
yeah.
realizing that whatever situation it is, sure, it ain't life and death, but we got the skills, we got the ability, we can do whatever it is that we're trying to do.
Yeah. And just knowing that no matter, what it is that we're doing, that we can make it to the other side is another thing as well. You mentioned too, like is being able to trust that your decision, whether it leads you in the wrong way or not, that's a whole nother question. But being able to in decision make that split decision and just being able to go with it and see where it takes you. And if you find out that it's wrong, kind of then you just go back to what we talked about earlier in this conversation and pivot. Get good at
right?
pivoting, get good at, shifting your stance, or get good at, finding another way or another route when one's closed off, one blocked off. And one thing I kind of wanted to share, a little off topic, but like, so I have an outdoor cat. So I also have a tracker on this cat, and it came in about 2 weeks ago. Right. And so it's like sometimes I just monitor him and see what he's going on. And like this guy, he's probably about like maybe like a foot, maybe a foot and a quarter like long, and probably weighs like 10, 12 pounds. Not like a regular sized cat. This guy is out and about like every day, just getting after it. And having like one thing about animals is like no matter rain, shine, snow, whatever, they should get out and get after it every single day, routinely, Sunday to Sunday, no rest days. It's just constant grind and get after it, which is like we can learn so many different things, like just studying all these different animals and these different uh, things aside from just books, because being able to become like almost a thought leader in your space, or being able to become someone that's looked up to, a lot of the time these people, they just take things from other areas and other facets of life, and when they present you that information, it sounds like super genius, but all they've really done is just taken something from their experiences in other industries and other areas and walks of life, and now bring that to whoever they're bringing it to. And like with the outdoors, as I said, there's not too many, at least here up in the Northeast, not too many people that take the time and really spend time outside and mother nature and enjoy it. So it's like being able to have those experiences allows you to learn from these things and learn certain things that you definitely wouldn't learn in any traditional form of schooling or any traditional form of like books or things like that.
I love that you brought that up because it's actually something I find a lot that I encounter is the fact that you can read something and you can learn from it. However, it's somebody else's journey, it's somebody else's story. You have to actually get out there and you got to live and experience things. You can test those theories that you learn in a book in the real world by getting out there and doing, but the important part is getting out there and doing.
Yeah. And just getting out there, that's the first step. Like, because if you're already getting out there, then doing is the next right step. So it's like it becomes that much easier. And there's a story I love, and I don't remember all the parts, so I'm gonna butcher it slightly, but pretty much there's a story of this one dude, and he for the first like 30 days just went to the gym, and 5 minutes later set his timer and then leave at the 5 minute mark. He did that for a month. But what he, and a lot of people thought he was crazy, thought he was wasting the time. But what he was doing is practicing the art of just showing up, right? Because once you show up, once you get out there, the only next right step is to actually get into action. So if you, at least you could build the habit of getting out there, then acting is gonna naturally come right after, because that's the next right step. And so just building up the habit of getting out there, then building up the habit of actually taking action, and consistently, you know doing that over and over will lead to, no matter what, and never eventually, if you do something for an extraordinary amount of time, eventually you'll become extraordinary at it.
It's definitely about just putting yourself where you want your heart to be. I think when
Yeah.
when you practice that and you build that up, all the rest of it just kind of follows. It's building that momentum that way.
Yeah.
So as we start to come toward the end of this, I got a question that I love to ask everybody at the end.
Yeah.
It seems to stump everybody or at least catch them off guard, and it's pretty fun.
Okay.
All right, so from I-95 all the way to the cat, all the way to the restaurant world, you got to leave us with some words of inspiration.
Anything.
Anything.
Anything. All right. So what I'll leave you with is this: no matter where you are in life, and we kind of didn't talk about this too much during this conversation, but something, no matter where you at in your walk in life right now, right? Whether you feel lost, whether you feel aimless, if you need a light post, that that compass, that guide to point you in the right direction, there's this concept called ikigai. And it might be something that you can do if you like going out hiking. Just go out for a hike, get it some alone time out in Mother Nature, some quiet time, no phones, no, just you and yourself, nothing else to distract you, and a pen and paper. and just start reflecting and write down. Ikigai stands for your reason for being, and what it is the intersection of four circles, and the four circles being what you love to do, like what would you do if no one else paid you for the rest of your life? Make a list for that. The second is what does the world need? Write down a list of all the problems you see in this world that you feel compelled to act on, right? Because there's a ton of things you could probably try and fix, but which ones do you feel compelled to act on? And after that, what can you be rewarded for? A lot of times we want to do charity, and if it fails us, yes, of course, but we still also have to make ends meet somehow. So what can we be rewarded for? And then what are we good at? Or something I like to say is what do we have the aptitude to be good at, right? And so when you get that intersection of all four circles, that is called your reason for being, and it's definitely maybe on your next hike, your next camping trip, something where you have some alone time out in the wilderness. Just go out there, think, self-reflect, and start thinking about. A lot of the times we don't spend time thinking about these big questions because it's like, oh, people think it's like woo woo and grandiose, and but it's like taking that time to really reflect and think about these things, whether it's in your own bedroom or on a trail. It'll help guide you down the trek of this walk that we call life. So that's probably would be my last words of wisdom or words of inspiration for anyone.
No, I love that. I think it's, just about putting out there and really evaluating, being honest with yourself, whether it's journaling or a quiet conversation in the mirror, whatever the case may be, whatever you're comfortable with. It's just being honest with yourself.
100%.
Well, John, as we come to the end of this, I appreciate the time, and this has been a great conversation. But you got to let people know how to get in touch with you or find out what you got going on, all that good stuff.
Yeah, if anything I said today was of any value to you guys, if I helped shift your mindset just a little bit or helped, give you a piece of advice that helped you in whatever you're going through right now, make sure to go to www.walktowealth.com. That is the best way to find me and connect with me. You'll find all the links to my social medias and everything at walk, and that's number two, wealth.com. And you can find and connect me there.
Awesome. Well, we definitely got to hook up again sometime down the road and
Yeah.
do this again.
Definitely. I make sure to come prepared with a bunch of my own personal journeys from my time outside in the wilderness.
That'd be cool.